The accusation came out of nowhere, crashing into the quiet rhythm of a routine grocery run, and turning an ordinary afternoon into a storm of suspicion, humiliation, and fear. For a moment the world inside the store seemed to freeze. Shoppers pausing mid-step, carts rolling to a stop, and eyes shifting all at once toward the elderly black woman standing near the checkout. Her hands trembled, her handles of her small shopping bag, as a store manager marched toward her with an expression sharpened by certainty instead of truth. The accusation echoed louder in her mind than the voices around her, a heavy weight of shame she did not deserve. Yet behind her, just outside the automatic doors, a group of bikers had arrived with engines rumbling like distant thunder. None of them knew that within minutes, they would become the unexpected force that exposed a lie, protected a grandmother, and flipped the entire store upside down. Evelyn Parker had lived in the neighborhood for decades. Soft-spoken, steady, and gentle in every movement, she carried herself with the calm dignity of someone who had survived much harder eras. Raised in the Deep South, she had endured a lifetime of biases, slurs, assumptions, and dangers, some loud and violent, others quiet and suffocating. At 73, she preferred simplicity. She shopped early in the day, tended to her small garden, and spent afternoons reading on her porch. The store she'd visited today was the same place she'd been shopping at for years. Familiar aisles, familiar layouts, familiar routines. But routine offered no shield against prejudice, and she knew this too well. Her day had begun peacefully, the kind of soft morning that felt like nothing could go wrong. A list written in neat cursive rested in her purse: milk, bread, apples, and flour. She moved slowly through the aisles, aware of her joints and the soft H in her hands. She noticed a young employee restocking shelves nearby, glancing at her more than once. At first, she thought nothing of it. People often smiled at her, or showed small acts of courtesy. But his expression wasn't warm. It was watchful. Narrow. She had seen eyes like that before, the kind that tracked rather than welcomed. Still, she ignored it. She selected her items carefully and moved toward the checkout with the quiet patience she carried everywhere. Outside the store, the sound of motorcycle engines grew louder. A local biker group, known in the area for charity rides and community support, had gathered to do their usual weekend route. Their presence was impossible to miss, leather vests and steel machines gleaming in the sunlight. Customers inside the store glanced toward the front windows as they arrived, some uneasy, others curious. Evelyn barely noticed them, too focused on balancing her bag and reaching for her small coin purse. As she neared the register, she felt a sudden tension behind her, the kind that prickles at the spine before the mind even understands what's happening. The store manager approached with authority fueled more by assumption than fact. The young employee who had been watching her earlier stood just behind him, his arms crossed with a hardened look of triumph, as though he had caught someone in the act. The air thickened around her. Customers leaned in, drawn by conflict the way people always were. She stood still, her posture controlled, but inside her chest, a familiar ache stirred, an old, painful recognition of being singled out, judged, and cornered because of the color of her skin. She had lived long enough to know how quickly situations like this could escalate, how easily dignity could be stripped away by false certainty. She tried to steady her breathing, feeling her throat tighten under the weight of stares. The manager's certainty only grew as more employees hovered. The young worker nodded, as if backing up a story only he believed. It was clear that no matter what she said, they had already decided on the narrative. She could sense a storm forming, a memory she never wanted repeated, one rooted in a time when accusations against people who looked like her often ended in tragedy rather than truth. Just outside, the bikers finished parking their motorcycles, laughing among themselves, stretching their arms after a long ride. Among them was a tall man with a calm but commanding presence, a person the group often looked to when conflicts needed easing. He happened to glance toward the store entrance and noticed something strange. Shoppers peering toward the checkout lanes, bodies frozen in a semicircle around an elderly woman. He saw fear in her shoulders before he saw the rest of the scene. His instinct sharpened instantly. Inside, the tension continued building. Evelyn felt her heart pounding, her dignity draining moment by moment, as the accusations continued without pause or reflection. Customers whispered under their breath, feeding the humiliation. It was not the first time she had carried the weight of suspicion in a public space, but age had made it harder. Not because she was weaker, but because she was tired of fighting battles she never started. She could feel her hands tremble more noticeably now, both from anger and the ache of a memory she wished the world had left behind decades ago. When the manager called for security, the crowd seemed to tighten around her. A feeling of entrapment settled across her chest. She remembered stories from her youth. Neighbors falsely accused, friends humiliated, and family members mistreated simply because someone claimed they saw something that never happened. The echoes of racism never truly left. They simply changed shape. Just then, the automatic doors hissed open again, and a shadow moved across the linoleum floor. As the lead biker stepped inside, his boots thudded against the ground, drawing the attention of the bystanders. His eyes scanned the scene quickly. Evelyn's trembling hands, the manager's raised posture, the employees' self-satisfaction, and the wall of silent customers forming around them. He didn't need to hear words to understand the power imbalance unfolding in front of him. He approached slowly, calmly, making his presence known without aggression. The bikers behind him followed, fanning out in a quiet line of solidarity. Their arrival shifted the atmosphere. Some customers stepped back. The employee who had been so confident suddenly stiffened, uncertainty creeping into his expression. The manager hesitated for the first time, briefly thrown off by the intrusion of unexpected witnesses. The lead biker's eyes moved toward the security cameras mounted high on the walls. He looked back at the crowd, then at Evelyn, whose posture remained still yet fragile. She looked at him with a mix of relief and disbelief, as though she couldn't understand why strangers would intervene. But in her eyes, there was also a flicker of hope, and without a word spoken by anyone, a choice settled across the moment. The crowd could continue assuming, or someone could demand truth. The biker walked to the customer service desk and gestured firmly toward the monitor system. His actions were steady, controlled, and undeniable. The manager hesitated, but the pressure of watching eyes forced him to follow. Employees gathered behind the counter, clicking through footage. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Every second stretched across the store as shoppers held their breath. Evelyn stood alone near the checkout, her grocery bag still in her hands, the weight of the accusation pressing down. Then, slowly, the truth revealed itself on the screen. A teenage boy, careless, impulsive, and likely unaware of the consequences, had slipped an item into her bag earlier in the aisle. Evelyn had not noticed. She had been focused on her shopping list, her steps careful, her attention elsewhere. The boy had vanished from the store minutes earlier. But the footage did not lie. It exposed not only the mistake, but also the eagerness with which suspicion had been placed on her. The employees stared at the monitor in stunned silence. The manager's face drained of certainty, replaced by something far closer to embarrassment and guilt. The young worker who had been so quick to judge stepped back, his confidence collapsing. The entire situation unraveled in seconds, tension melting into a heavy realization that they had accused an innocent woman based on a stereotype, a bias, a quiet but powerful form of racism that still lingered beneath their decisions. When the truth reached the crowd, whispers shifted into stunned quiet. People averted their eyes, unwilling to confront their role in quietly accepting the accusation. Shame rippled through the onlookers, a silent acknowledgement of complicity. But Evelyn stood unmoving, not because she was unaffected, but because the emotional weight of the last several minutes had carved deeper than anyone could see. The humiliation lingered even after vindication. The sting of being assailed simply for existing in a space where she was watched instead of welcomed had reopened old wounds she wished had long healed. The lead biker approached her slowly, making sure not to startle her. He offered her presence, protection, and quiet support without a single spoken word. His posture alone conveyed what the crowd could not: a recognition of the injustice she had faced and a promise that she would not face it alone. Behind him, the other bikers created a protective circle, not out of intimidation, but out of respect. Their presence communicated something deeper: that community could stand against prejudice, that strength could be used to shield the vulnerable, instead of overpowering them. As Evelyn walked out of the store, flanked by the bikers, the crowd parted. Some looked down. Some watched with regret. Others learned something they wouldn't forget. Outside, the fresh air felt heavier than she expected, filled with both release and residue from what had happened. The bikers escorted her to the parking lot, offering silent assurance. She looked back at the store once, seeing the glass doors reflect not her shame but her resilience. In that reflection, she recognized the truth she had lived for decades. That moments like these were never just about groceries or misunderstandings. They were about the weight of assumptions carried by those who looked like her. They were about the quiet, persistent forms of racism that shaped everyday experiences, even in places as ordinary as a grocery store. The sun warmed her face as she took a breath, steadying herself. She knew she had survived another moment meant to diminish her. And she knew, too, that her story would echo the minds of everyone who witnessed it, reminding them that racism often hides in assumptions, in rushed judgments, in the comfort of believing the worst about someone who never deserved it. As the bikers stood by her side, she felt the strength of community rise around her. A simple trip to the grocery store had uncovered a deeper truth about justice, dignity, and the power of stepping in when wrongs demand to be challenged. And for anyone who hears her story, one question remains long after the moment passes: how many moments like this go unseen? Because no one is watching the cameras.